Luno, the fastest, easiest way to buy Bitcoin. If you're just getting into crypto, it's the perfect place to start. Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Heilpern show, powered by the VC firm Icon Plus Capital and sponsored by BlockFi. So if you don't know, BlockFi offer very competitive interest rates, particularly on Bitcoin and stablecoins. I use them, I love them. So if you are interested, then I'm going to leave a link in the description and in the comment section. I think you can get around $250 when you sign up. So pretty good. So today I have a very exciting guest. I'm in the middle of reading his book, so it's great just to speak to him. And also with everything that's going on in the world right now, particularly with inflation, which we found out is not transitory. It's going to be great to speak with him. So joining me today is Jeff Booth, entrepreneur, tech leader, and author of The Price of Tomorrow. Jeff, great to have you. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having me, Laylah.
Yeah, it's so good to speak with you. I think that especially during times like this where we're seeing astronomical levels of inflation, we were told that it was transitory. It's clearly not quite transitory. I know you have some really interesting ideas, which I really want to go into. And I kind of want to start with the premise of your book, which is essentially that technology and the price technology will essentially lead to price deflation, which will then cause mass unemployment. So I'd really like to understand exactly what you mean by this. Where does technology come into play?
Yeah, so the overriding factor in the world right now, and what central banks have been up against for a long time, is technology is supposed to make our lives, give us more for less, which is inflationary. So that technology is productivity, exponential productivity. And if you look at your phone or this call we're doing, if you think about anything we do today, we're used essentially technology to do it. And that technology, what ends up happening with technology is things move towards the marginal cost of production, which becomes free, especially with AI. So a really good example is 10 years ago, 20 years ago, think of all the industries around camera equipment, camera sales, film distribution of it, and everything else, and how many photos you took.
Yep.
Compared to how many photos you take today, and the cost of it. Entire industries are decimated. New industries are formed, and the new industries give you way more for less. We take trillions of photos. How the photos are driving part of our culture today, and it's all essentially free. The photo, the camera on the iPhone is, I think it's an under $5 bill of materials item today, and it produces 3D and everything else. So that even that camera 10 years ago would have been $700. So when you think about what happens, it just that base layer of technology is driving everything down in price as we're supposed to be getting more. Against that, and that's why I said it's been happening for a long time now, against that, we have a system that can't allow deflation. So our system that we live in is a credit-based system, and that has to grow forever. So inflationary, you have, we believe we need 2% in inflation to survive.
Yeah.
It's not true. The system that we designed, credit-based system that doesn't actually have hard money at the bottom of it, it's just credit, requires inflation to survive. So that raises a very interesting quandary, or it's actually the driving force of every other thing in the world today. These two things colliding into each other, one man-made system that must create inflation, against technology that's trying to drive the other way. And so when you do that, what ends up happening is you concentrate wealth and power in very few hands from the inflation, and you're picking the pocket of a whole bunch of other people. And they're looking out at the world, and the things that aren't being driven by technology, and there is still technology in it, but let's say housing or food hasn't transitioned as fast as others, or education. Education is free today. People just don't know it's free today.
Yeah.
But all of those industries that are scarce go up in price, and a whole bunch of people that had their pocket picks through inflation can't afford to live anymore, and they rise up and they vote for different leaders who carry on the same type of tactic, because the entire inflationary system would collapse without manipulation.
So why does that 2% inflation have to exist? Why is inflation necessary?
But what ends up happening with an inflationary monetary policy is and let's say the reason it exists in the first place is because then governments can give you more service than they can pay for, and they can hide some of that in inflation that nobody votes for. So it can expand government's powers to essentially pick your pockets, and because we will all vote for people who will say, if somebody said, I'm going to tell you the truth, here's what it looks like, and we need to go into a deflationary spiral and every bank will collapse and every institution collapse, would that person get elected?
No.
And so that's the point. We all believe that we need inflation. We don't. It's insane to think that inflation. It's insane to think humanity requires a theft in their money,
of course,
to live in a productive society. It's just not true. It's categorically not true. What is true is the system requires it, and because when debt keeps on getting bigger and bigger, inflation has to go higher to pay back the debt, because you can't pay it back with taxes. You can't pay it back if you increase taxes. If you charged every company 100% taxes in the U.S., you couldn't put a dent into 1 year of what is needed to run the budget. so taxes can't solve it. So you have to resort to playing tricks and essentially funding in a different way, which is destroying currency and hurting a whole bunch of people as a result of that.
It sounds quite inherently evil and like it's sort of done by design. Do you think that it is done by design, or do you think it's just by accident that we ended up here?
So it would be easy to think it's done by design, and I think there's a number of books out there that would talk about by design in the monetary layer. Well, that might be true in some sense. I don't think that where we are now is done by design. I think it's more ineptitude and not understanding how a system feedback loop works, and that system feedback loop making it bigger and bigger and bigger all the time, requiring more debt all the time, requiring more, and no way out. But ask any policy. Ask yourself, if you were elected queen of the world today, how would you fix it? And how would you fix it other than an alternative system? Because the system itself can't fix it. Because if you stopped inflating, if you allowed the free market to work, people would not want the free market to work right now, because the free market would mean every single thing would have a cascading collapse. Everything. Every bank would fail around the world. You would have no food on street or on shelves. It would look terrible, because we are so far past the point of rescue on the existing system. So what you could say policymakers are trying to do, and they're scared to death, and rightfully so, is they have to. What ends up happening is when you have corruption in money, you have corruption everywhere as a result. And so what they'd have to do is, look over here and create more misinformation to be able to keep printing, which hurts a whole class of people. But you have to ask, what would they do? So they're trapped. Unfortunately, they're trapped right now, and as a result of them being trapped, we are all trapped.
So there's so much there to unpick. So I want to start with the idea that if we move to an alternative system, you're essentially saying that everything would collapse, banks would collapse, there'd be supply chain issues, no food on the streets. But I'll get into Bitcoin in a bit, because I know that every tweet you end with Bitcoin. You're obviously a Bitcoiner. So how then would we even move to a kind of world of hyper Bitcoinization if there would be this serious collapse? And I know that Bitcoiners don't really care necessarily if there's going to be a collapse with the banks, right? We're kind of almost unbanked anyway.
They should care.
Okay, explain.
They care a lot, and they should care because if you don't understand that piece, you misunderstand human nature and what human nature would do under those conditions.
Yes,
And
of
under
course.
those conditions, we are very susceptible to dictatorships controlling us and doing really terrible things to other people. So every Bitcoiner should care that the existing system doesn't collapse. They should be voting for a smooth. In fact, Bitcoin
A smooth transition.
smooth transition. And that smooth transition, as mad as they are at the existing system, as mad as they are, there are people in the existing system that are terrible people.
Yeah.
But there's also a whole bunch of good people in the existing system, and it's easy to turn against all people in an existing system when you see the truth and what's that existing system is. Most of what's happening in the existing system is just momentum that has to keep on feeding back on itself, and many people have no idea. So what would a transition look like? I look at Bitcoin. I look at Bitcoin specifically, and that's actually why I post quite a bit. I've looked everywhere for understanding this problem. What possible way, what possible bridge to the other side is there? And I've only seen Bitcoin. It's the only possible bridge I've seen. I may be wrong, but I've done investigation everywhere, and I don't see another one for a variety of reasons. But what thing is happening today is people are looking at Bitcoin, and they're looking at Bitcoin through the lens of where Bitcoin is today.
Okay.
And imagine in the US or Canada or any G7 nation that everything collapsed. Could you use your Bitcoin everywhere? And that's the problem. Today it's hard.
Yes.
But what ends up happening with all technology is people project the current forward instead of where it's going forward. So the network effect on Bitcoin, the network effect on layer 2 on Bitcoin is making the roads easier and easier to use Bitcoin, to be able to become a store of value and to purchase with it. And so I use this example. I've used this example often. In 1999, when the dot-com market collapsed, or 2000 when the dot-com market collapsed, and Amazon was trading at under $5, and they were selling books and a couple other items. What if in that time, and in the writing was on the wall, that Amazon was going to be this great company. I was an investor in it then. I saw what it was going to be, this great company. Writing was all on the wall then. They're doing the same thing today. But what if every retail store collapsed in 1999 and Amazon was selling books? You would see what I'm talking about at a layer in the monetary layer here, right? So what ends up happening is a transition happens in the network. One system builds, and it's getting stronger and stronger and stronger, and one system flails and gets harder and harder and harder to be able to use. And as that system starts to flail, more and more people see the new system, and they walk across the bridge to the new system. That's what Bitcoin is. And as more and more people are walking across the bridge to build the new system, both in holding Bitcoin, and yes, the early people walking across the bridge own more of the future, have more say in the future. But all people walking across the bridge make the bridge better and better for everyone else, and it's easier and easier to use. And so all the investment in layer 2, all the technology, all the essentially, you could look at yourself, myself, at this call, us talking to other people who will see this call and say, I need to get off zero. I need to understand Bitcoin. And you could see those people as becoming nodes in the new infrastructure, nodes in Bitcoin, which make that system stronger and stronger and stronger over time. If that happens at the right rate, then if you looked at El Salvador today, you could buy your groceries with Bitcoin, right? You can. So there's places in the world that you can start to see this transition happening. It just hasn't. It needs more time to move to the other side.
Okay, so it's all about a slow transition. It's not as if tomorrow we can essentially overthrow everything, the existing system.
So let me just clarify that too.
Okay.
I can't say what will happen, because when you have a system that is this fragile,
Yes,
anything could happen. I've
I
often
see.
said, which snowflake causes the avalanche? We got a lot of snow falling on the avalanche, and and there could be a cascading collapse anytime. There could be and that cascading collapse would cause massive more printing to try to stop it. But there's a lot of fragility in the existing system. So I'm telling you what I hope happens
The
rather than
healthiest way.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that would be the healthiest way. That slow transition, infrastructure slowly being built so people can buy their groceries. But my question really is, El Salvador got a lot of hostility from the IMF, even the Bank of England, which is laughable because, of course, inflation is in at unprecedented levels in England. Yet the Bank of England are focusing on El Salvador rather than themselves. The IMF, the US, so much hostility. Even Christine Lagarde, the president of the European central bank, she basically said that Bitcoin isn't a currency. So we can see that the establishment really don't like Bitcoin. They see the power that it has. So how then is this how is this transition really going to take place? It's as if, like, let's say Blockbuster versus Netflix. What if Blockbuster were powerful enough and angry enough to actually stop the development of Netflix? Is that possible?
So, so number one, your question makes me laugh, because yesterday I put a tweet out that said people in glass houses shouldn't, made of manipulated money, shouldn't throw stones. And
Right.
your glass house of the world, IMF lives in, and everything else, throwing stones at somebody who wants freedom and a currency that can't be manipulated seems kind of ironic. And so, but more important there is every monopoly faces the same thing. If you The only difference this time, and is, by the way, it's a big difference, because we've always had a monopoly of money that we haven't questioned, that it always will look like that. But if you look at monopolies in the economy, and that question, you look at other monopolies in an economy and what ends up happening. What ends up happening is a monopoly has its control through scale or something else, and it controls the access to that monopoly. And few people are privileged. The monopoly is privileged, and most people are hurt by it. Right? Any monopoly. So what protects that is those few try to protect the walls of that monopoly. What ends up happening is then technology lowers the barrier cost, the access cost, so much so, and produces so much benefit that monopoly, to change their business, they can't change their business, because the access comes from it delivering value in a completely different way. Your Blockbuster Netflix example, or the one I wrote about in the book, is a good example, because the lowering of the cost of essentially fiber and video meant nobody had to drive to a store to pick up a video and back. That you could, in an instant, technology changed the rules and invalidated Blockbuster's business. And how did it do so? It opened access for a whole bunch of people who didn't have access before. And so every technology does the same thing. When you hit that point in technology, when you have kind of a 10x value over the existing infrastructure can't compete. So, and what ends up happening is, because way more people are hurt by the monopoly than are helped by the monopoly, all of the people that are hurt start using the new technology, or all the entrepreneurs that say, "Wow, I could never create a business over here in this structure, but
Yeah.
I can on this new structure," and they go to build their dreams, hopes, and power the future on the new technology. So that happens everywhere, from horses to cars to the printing press to the internet. Every single thing looks the same thing, and the monopolies that used to stand before were built on different rules, and then technology changes the rules. That's all that's happening that's all that's happening right now. Is Bitcoin specifically lowered the barrier cost, access costs, everything else from the existing system, and a whole bunch of people that are hurt by the existing system are moving to the new system, and that movement creates that bridge across to the other side. It actually makes perfect sense that El Salvador would be on Bitcoin before the US, because
Yeah.
the US is the monopoly. And just like it made perfect sense that no vendor that sold to Walmart was the first seller to Amazon.
Mm.
It was all the people who couldn't. It was the 99% of products that couldn't get into Walmart went on to Amazon. So it's just what ends up happening with any technology change.
Yeah, land of the place of opportunity, the blockchain right now, the land of opportunity. But you did an interview with Andrew Yang, which I was actually so happy to see, because I want to talk about universal basic income, because he has this idea that with technology developing, people are essentially going to be put out of work. And we saw that happen at the turn of the century. But essentially, with technology speeding up right now, the whole idea that people can simply learn to code isn't quite possible. And so he believes to sort of, I guess, make that transition easier, we should have a universal basic income. So I'd love to know your thoughts on that, and whether and how you think we would transition, Bitcoin aside, just in general with technology moving forward, the metaverse and everything like that. I think engineers and developers are one of the most sought after jobs right now. So what's, your lorry driver going to do when we're all sort of living in the metaverse?
Yeah, keep reading my book, by the way.
Okay.
Andrew came, and I don't think publicly he can say this and everything else, but he came on almost a 180 from his belief pattern before. So
Oh, okay.
So we agreed. So we both see technology and what it's going to do, and it's going to save time, and that saving of time comes as a result of jobs going away. Like here's the most kind of big example I could say. Why don't you pay for your oxygen, the air you're breathing right now?
I feel like we kind of do.
The air you're breathing right now, why don't you pay for it? And it would be ludicrous to create an economy where you had to pay for the air you're breathing, because the air you're breathing is abundant, right? We don't even think, like, why would we do that? Well, there are so many places that essentially technology is going to create the same thing, just like photos, just like so it's moving everywhere. And what it means is things should be dropping in price as jobs come out of the market. Things should be dropping in price at the same rate. The reason why basic income is kind of used as a fix is because you're pushing prices up against the natural forces, and then people say, I need money to live, and think about this. So I create more inflation, so house prices go up. And because house prices go up, and it's the only way people can escape, it's one of the only ways people can escape that inflation, Blackstone starts buying houses, and then rents go up.
Mm-hmm.
And a whole bunch, and people can't pay their bills. So then government says, wait, I need to create more inflation so I can give them more UBI so they can pay their bills. It's insane. So
Of course,
what
because it's a cycle.
It's a cycle that reinforces itself and reinforces itself. And a lot of people will vote for that cycle because they're so hurt by the system. It's like a monopoly board, going around a monopoly board. Somebody has all the properties. The properties, they get to keep the properties forever. There's this injection making those properties more and more valuable. And then a whole bunch of people that can't get around the monopoly board anymore and can't end the game. Normally in the monopoly, game would be thrown out or the game would end, right? People would break but they can't get around the board. So what the people in power say, instead of giving them $200 when they pass go, we're going to give them $400 and push the prices even higher, right? So, and then they can't get around the board again. And so so when you look at UBI through that lens, that's what it is. And and Andrew, after that call, we've had lots of conversations since and everything
That's
else.
cool.
But he became a Bitcoin advocate after that call, because but he asked me, he goes, how many people understand Bitcoin like you do? Like this is a transfer in systems that can allow humanity to flourish on the other side, and we need to get to the other side of that system. So I have lots of respect. I have especially lots of respect for somebody who will look at the facts and change their mind. But he now understands Bitcoin and why it's so important. He's actually speaking at the Bitcoin conference as well.
Oh, amazing. That's so good to be able to, I guess, orange pill somebody, especially a politician, because I think we need more people on our side. But in terms of inflation in general, I think what really concerned me was the idea that people are claiming that it was going to be transitory. I think the video actually came out of the UK, which was saying that economists didn't expect it. Which is so strange because I don't have any finance degree or anything like that. I have a journalism degree, and yet I expected it, right? So how do I know that inflation was going to come and things like that? But economists didn't. So either the economists that are essentially in charge, because they obviously provide financial advice for those who set policy, either they're ignorant or there's something else going on here. So how did they not know?
Yeah, so do you remember that Paul Krugman
yes,
quote that says about the internet? The internet it will make no difference to the economy.
The fax machine.
The fax machine. Yeah, same.
Yeah.
So and then worse, 15 years later, defending that quote.
I didn't know he defended it. Oh, I didn't know that.
In a big way, he defended it, and he said this, which is way worse than the original quote. I'm an economist. I don't make predictions on technology. So, and why is that worse? We have an economy globally that is more and more led by technology. All of it is technology. Yet an economist think they're immune from people making mistakes on technology. An economist that doesn't understand technology, it can't be a very good economist by definition. And that's the thing that's so hard in these transitions. Most people, we predict our future for our existing path forward instead of where technology is leading us. It's very hard to understand. And so there's a whole bunch of economists that are stuck in that same loop, thinking they're playing by the rules before and all their models are working before. And they simply cannot work in where we're moving with technology. It's actually it's really this simple. Technology moving at this rate requires a currency that allows for deflation. Requirement. And that requirement is almost impossible for an existing central bank to allow.
Right.
So, but I'm going to put a caveat on that requirement. It doesn't require it if you concentrate all control in central banks and the entire world looks like China, where you have very few people making decisions for everybody else. But if the world looks like that, it's not a world I want my kids to grow up in. But where technology is moving, how fast it's moving, it requires a currency that allows for deflation. Otherwise, with inflation against that, because they're opposing forces, otherwise you concentrate all wealth in the hands of few. It's really that simple.
Wow. So it's
the only thing that I've seen that will allow that transition. I'm really trying to understand. So it's kind of just the push and pull and the friction between technology, which is allowing for deflation in prices because of the abundance that it's creating, versus the essentially the monetary system that we have, which is causing inflation, and then those two together creates this centralized power. And so yeah, exactly. And you centralize faster and faster and faster because technology is moving one way and the opposite way. So people that are thinking you're going to have inflation forever, the minute the government stop printing, you're going to have a deflationary spiral. The minute.
And that's good bad?
So that would collapse the system.
Right.
It would collapse. Into that collapse with no food on street and everything.
Yes.
People, us, we would elect dictators to fix it for us. There would be, so individual rights and freedoms would go away a different way if that collapsed like that. Without the collapse, keep on printing, we elect dictators in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
And so unfortunately, there's only door one, keep printing. And when I say door one or door two, don't. And keep printing on the way there typically looks like revolution and war. There's high likelihood that as you keep going, even in the US, that you have revolution that trickles over and everything else, as more and more people think it's those other people that's the problem, when it's a system problem. But at a high level, you have one or two doors. Keep printing. All of the negative externalities from keep printing. Don't keep printing. All the negative externalities of that. And that's actually why the system can't change itself. It needs an escape valve. It needs this bridge to the other side. And so a lot of people that are understanding Bitcoin are starting to walk across this bridge. And the bridge is going to, and on the other side, it's really exciting. It's really exciting for the people. There's so much opportunity in the ecosystem right now. It's really exciting for but this transition from one system to another is going to be messy.
So both doors lead to hell and dictatorship, essentially.
Unfortunately, there is no.
Okay.
Unfortunally, there is no.
That's
fix.
good. No, that's a good thing.
Well,
I would say, yeah.
It is, but it's actually also why in Bitcoin, many more people. I know people do care about this, but it's so easy to look at an unjust system and say those people. It's really all of those people, and there are people in there that know the system's unjust and gain from it anyways, and will close their eyes to the gains that they get. So I understand how you could paint everybody with a picture of a few people and say, but most people in that system don't know what's happening.
So I have so many questions. Okay, so how did you, I'm going to start with this one first, actually. How did you land on this realization between deflation and inflation? And how did you really just realize before Bitcoin that we desperately need an alternative system and that both doors lead to dictatorship and hell, essentially?
I've always been, and this sounds arrogant. So
no, it's fine.
I've always been able to see the future in a way that very few of my friends could. In fact, that because I know how my own mind changes and stuff as well, and I'm not always exactly right, but directionally, it's what creates. It's actually why I've always been an entrepreneur, and I've created tons of value in understanding how the technology, the intersection. It's almost from asking this. It's why does the world look like this when technology could create it to look like this? And so if you just think through that, is what ends up happening is all of our reality from our systems we live in and the things we use are actually ideas first. If you think about this iPhone, it was an idea that competed with an idea of a BlackBerry that you needed a keyboard. And when it first came out, everybody thought it was a toy. Everybody using BlackBerry thought, what a gimmick and everything else.
Yes.
And look at it now. But that idea was just such a radical idea. And by the way, and if you think about the evolution of that, Palm Pilot, which was almost the same idea, didn't hit the right step of the kind of the intersection of when technology changed the rules to be able to create a better idea. It was early and it failed.
Yes.
As technology opens up an ability to do something totally different, our minds change and we accept a new idea, and that new idea is really exciting because it gives us so much value, and so it explodes. That's what I do in business. I do that everywhere in business. I've been quite successful in a whole bunch of different companies in business, boards, investments, and everything else. And so from that and seeing all of the different things that I was working on and the leading edge of what's coming in AI and 3D printing and all of that, I couldn't stop asking, why aren't prices going down everywhere? And investigated why prices weren't going down everywhere. Like it was kind of a 10-year question, and I would
Oh,
talk
wow.
about this all the time. And I did not want to write a book about it. But I'm an entrepreneur. I want to. When I see something that doesn't work, I have to figure out to the bottom of it. Why not? How could it work? and so that's what led me to look at this. And then I realized, okay, why inflation is like this, why it's needed for the existing system. But when I looked at the last 20 years required $185 trillion of easing to be able to pretend we work to grow the economy by 46 trillion. To essentially to when I said those angles, one system's moving this way and the other system must have the opposite effect. So you have to increase the amount of printing to offset that over and over and over again. I could see the train wreck coming, and the train wreck, and I realized that my family, my kids, wouldn't grow up in the same type of world that I did, and I needed to write the book to be able to explain that, because it was driving me crazy. It was driving me crazy that you had a whole bunch of technology entrepreneurs on one side talking about what they were going to do and how much money they were going to make and everything else, not being able and not being able to put together you can't make that much money if the free market works and the prices come down. Like, that money is being a derivative of inflation driving the monopolies bigger and bigger and bigger. So Google bigger and bigger. So that's why I wrote the book. I eventually got mad.
I love that. Good. No, that's great. I think we need this kind of education. I think it upsets me that there isn't any financial literacy in school. I have my own theories as to why that is, which a lot of people probably share. So I'd love having these conversations, books like yours, which really just hopefully wake people up, and, we can try and move to a better system. So how did you then realize that Bitcoin was the answer? What year was that? And talk to me about that transition, because a lot of people obviously think it's a scam when they first hear about it. They think it's this weird internet money that doesn't exist. So tell me about your journey behind it.
So I wish so I was too busy in my businesses to be able to take this Bitcoin seriously in the beginning.
Happens.
And bunch of my developers kept coming to me and saying, you got to get on this, it's really important and everything else. And I still didn't take it seriously. I was in Bitcoin before I wrote my book, but if you'll notice on the book, there's one paragraph on Bitcoin in the book. It's not a Bitcoin book. It's and even after I wrote the book, I was still and am still open to any possibility that could change this system. But what I've realized, and I'm still open if there's but I don't see another possibility. I think to move to the other side without revolution, war, reset. And if you had that, you would actually build an inflationary system on top of the reset again, just like has happened throughout history. I don't see another anything that actually competes with what Bitcoin is to get to the other side. So that journey to get there, and I remember my book was written 2 years ago, and everything is played out. If you just look at that book when it was written and you think about what's happened since, it's like a roadmap for what's happening and what happens next as a result of this. So it's hardened my position on Bitcoin. I think it's that important.
Yeah, I agree. Since the last 2 years, since COVID started, and all this money printing, my position on Bitcoin has totally been solidified even more. So you said that there isn't another alternative, but you are open to seeing, if there is one, you're open to it, you're open-minded, which I think is great. But there are over 10,000 different cryptocurrencies. Of course, they aren't all the same. We've got, let's just say a nice top 5. So what is it about Bitcoin which really seems to be the answer compared to all the other different cryptocurrencies? What is it about the technology that you really admire?
It's hard to do in a show like this, and that, but I'll give that a stab. The way that the system is designed through proof of work and decentralization, people will not make a choice to have a deflationary currency because there's too much wealth and power to be able to design a different system. So we won't make that choice, and that's why the decentralization essentially that's driven into the protocol, the security proof of work, that security is a feature, that proof of work is a feature of the system. The energy use and require for Bitcoin is the thing that keeps it decentralized, and it's a feature of the system that that stops humanity from actually changing the rules. So that's a big part of it. And now, but let's just say, okay, Bitcoin versus Ethereum. So Bitcoin tries to win store of value, this innovation and everything else, and it does so over time. And remember, if Bitcoin came out today and everybody knew what it was today, and it was in its infancy, it would have been shut down. Today, like, so if it came out and it was a small market cap and everything else, and it had this dream of being able to do this, regulators would shut it down because now they know what it means, right? So when you think about what's happening with the IMF, when you think about what happens with China, when you think about people are trying to shut it down and they can't shut it down, it's impossible. But in year 2, they might have been able to in Bitcoin. So you had this evolution and this system that got hardened and hardened and hardened before people woke up to realize that it's a redistribution of power away from central power to humanity, and so now it's far enough along that it's very, very difficult to stop. So now enter other altcoins, and because Bitcoin was going after that, let's use Ethereum as example. Wow, this is a really interesting blockchain, can do this and everything else. How do we make money? But that looks more like a company making money, and so a small group of people do a pre-sale, a pre-mine, and say we're going to create a world computer, and it's going to be blockchain for everything else. And I actually do understand why Ethereum would have a network effect today, doing NFTs and everything else. But the design of the system in fees makes it less secure, and you have to centralize, and you have to centralize, and you keep changing the design of the system. And you have to keep, and it's not just, you keep changing it by the people who control the system. And so, and then altcoins underneath that, as fees go up on Ethereum, it opens up attacks from below on, I can do the same thing for less cost, and you have tons of different altcoins. So I'm not necessarily against people making their own choice on their free market investment. They can make their choice and everything else. I just categorically, I don't believe they have any value in the long term. I think what ends up happening is the design of Bitcoin kind of on layer 1, what ends up happening on layer 2 and layer 3. Why do you need those other coins? I think everything starts to aggregate to the winner, because all of those use cases can be designed on something that's way more efficient and reinforces the primary one. So it's not. I just think, I wouldn't. Again, I'm an investor in technology, lots of technology companies, and I tend to think, what do I believe in? What would I put my money in, and set it and forget it? I wouldn't do that on a whole bunch of altcoins. In Bitcoin, I can easily do that.
I love that. I love hearing those kind of arguments. But in terms of just the other side of what we were talking about, going through those doors and reaching the other side with a better system, how do you then see it played out? So do you actually see a world where things are denominated in Satoshis? So tell me how you see it. And also, do you think that we'd see only certain states, certain countries adopting this new technology? Or is that just part of the transition? How does the future look?
It's part of the transition. And so what gives the U.S. Dollar strength is, besides kind of using oil energy through a war machine to be able to price oil in U.S. dollars. What gives the U.S. dollar strength around the world is a network effect that it's used everywhere. It's a common currency everywhere. As that happens with Bitcoin, as more and more countries, users, and everything else start to do it, and layer 2 with Lightning or Liquid and, start to use this, more and more people. That's what I meant about the network effect. More and more people, the on-ramps, the technology, the different things, the use cases. It's way easier to use Bitcoin and be secure in Bitcoin today than it was 5 years ago. The on-ramps are way easier. It's simple.
Way easier.
And the UX and the design, and so the innovation coming into this ecosystem is bringing more and more people in. That if I want to hire an engineer in India, without going through government, without going through a bank. By the way, it took 3 weeks one time to get a 6-figure wire transfer. About 2 months ago to India through it's just a nightmare through the existing system and all the paperwork and everything else. I don't need to do that anymore. I can hire anybody anywhere, and I can start trading with those people through an alternative network. That network is in its infancy, but it's growing leaps and bounds. And more people are moving onto that network, which opens up more and more. So that's the transition that we're talking about. And states can't stop it because people everywhere where a state has tried to stop Bitcoin, it's accelerated. Why?
Yes.
Because they're essentially screaming at you with a megaphone that says, "Here's why you need it."
Yeah. I think it's so interesting. And we saw that happen with China, saw that happen in Nigeria. All it does is either further decentralize the network, or it forces people to end up trading peer-to-peer, which was the initial goal in the first place. So yeah, it's really interesting. I want to just move on slightly because I know we're obviously short for time at this point, but I'd love to talk about entrepreneurship because obviously you've had tremendous success, especially with Build Direct. So I kind of want to understand, firstly, do you think that anybody can be an entrepreneur?
I think anybody can. I just don't think people are geared towards it. And I think, and why is they perceive risk differently. So they don't perceive risk as status quo. They think status quo is safety. And they perceive, so a lot of people would look at entrepreneurs as these enormous risk takers. I categorically disagree. Because here's the way I look at it, and an entrepreneur at being one. I'm risk adverse. I see the risk in the existing system, and I don't want a job in the existing system where I have no control over my destiny. And even if I go over here so that's actually why I would chase down to the sand. Will this work or not? What will it take? And because it's a bet on yourself, it's a bet on your team, it's a bet on what you have to do to change to create the opportunity. And so even if you fail, you come out of that learning with so much learning that the next time it's easier. And so I think great entrepreneurs aren't risk takers, they're asymmetric bet takers.
That's such a good point, because I remember years ago, I was living in a country and I loved my job and I was so happy that the job brought me to that country, but the company was failing. And so I had to leave the country. And I was so upset because now I didn't have control over where I lived. Right. And it was from that moment that I said to myself, I can't ever rely on an exterior party to basically determine how my life is going to look. So at that point, I was like, no, I've got to make my own money. I can't do that. So I totally get that. So a lot of people watching are trying to build in this industry, in the crypto space. So what advice, I know it's really cringy, but it is actually very helpful. What advice would you give somebody who is looking to start building, especially in the world that we're living in right now? A lot of people do feel that opportunities are being taken away, just given travel restrictions and inflation and things like that. So what kind of words of wisdom would you give someone looking to build right now?
There's so much. I wish I was younger, because there's so much right now. There literally is, because as anytime there's chaos in the world, there's system transitions, entrepreneurs are required to be able to move that forward. Hopes, dreams, everything else. And on their hopes and dreams do we ride as a civilization. That's what ends up happening. And so when you look at system problems, and those system problems create a whole bunch of pain for other people, understanding how you can fix that pain is what an entrepreneur does. And when you do that in a way that delivers tons of value, the business is bound to be successful. Now, doing that, figuring that out, is which market, how do I do this, how do I focus? But I'll give you an example of what's happening today. So in existing industry, and you could use Twitter's new CEO, you could use Google, you could use Facebook, you could use, our communication channels are getting more and more controlled. And they're getting more and more controlled. And what ends up happening to build these monopolies, what ends up happening is you have to attract people who will deliver, let's use YouTube as an example, people who will deliver different content to your system, which attracts users. And so people think it's attracting users that's the trick. It's not. It's attracting content providers. And then as more and more content providers come in, and if you think about how many hours of YouTube are uploaded a day, and most of that is not seen, what ends up happening is there's so much competition to try to be found that more and more users are attracted to the platform. And the way those platforms are monetized today are YouTube gets all the money through advertising, and these people are essentially selling their souls through advertising, and they get 1%, 2%, 0.5% of the advertising rake to be able to meet a buyer. On layer 2 on Lightning, and what's happening on Lightning, that whole thing will be reinvented, and it will be reinvented everywhere. Lots of other opportunities, but that whole industry would be reinvented in that if content is the value, and most of the content producers are getting very, very little value, then there's an opportunity on a system that lowers the barrier cost, because Google's system requires that barrier cost because it was built on a different model. But on Lightning, it lowers the barrier cost, and there's somebody that could come out and say, listen, I need 3% to run the business, or 5% to run the business, but 95% of the value is yours. Where do you think the content producers would go? And then,
Lightning.
And as you did that, what do you think if the content producers are all going there? Where do you think the people would go? And so you're able to recreate a whole bunch of value by giving more people value. It changed business. That's just one example, but that example would be in a whole bunch of different places on the new rails of commerce that are coming.
So it's true when people say Bitcoin fixes this. We really could start actually seeing those kind of decentralized systems on the Bitcoin network, YouTube alternatives and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's what I expect to happen. That'll take a bunch of time, but once that network effect starts to spin, it'll spin faster and faster and faster.
Amazing. So what are you working on right now? Is there another book in the works? I know you said you didn't really want to write one.
Ask that, and
of course.
Right now, I doubt it. I'll probably put up free content rather than and I do a bunch of these podcasts to be able to get out. I'll never say never, because maybe I'll get mad again on something else. But this is moving. I think it's inevitable, and people like you, a whole bunch of influencers in this community, I would rather just take the message forward, and and build it. I can just slide off into the background.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on, Jeff. It's been so interesting. I'm really excited to continue reading your book. Where can people follow you and find your book?
Probably just best on Twitter at Jeff Booth. The book's called The Price of Tomorrow: Why Deflation is Key to an Abundant Future, and Amazon's probably best for that.
Jeff, I want to thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure, and I want to thank everyone for tuning in.
Thanks a lot, Layah.
All right, we'll speak soon. And guys, don't forget to tune in next week for another brilliant guest.